What's up, guys? I'm Coach Bo. About to jump into a call with one of my students, Matt Lange. I've been working with him just under a year. Something we're currently working on is he recently just opened a virtual market up in Memphis. And so we're really starting to put these pieces together from a marketing standpoint, back-end operations as far as dispo, construction, and things like that. And we're really starting to put together the pieces and tracking information so he can launch that successfully. So we'll see how that goes. Matt Lange is one of my greatest students because I truly don't think he has limiting beliefs. He loves it when I smack him in the face, and he actually encourages me to do that. So we have a really good relationship. He likes the direct feedback. He wants me to give direct feedback. So he's been a phenomenal student in that regard. He's definitely coachable. He's growth oriented. He's always trying to be better. So usually when I just smack him in the teeth, it's really the one thing that he needs and wants. Well, I think it's really important when you first come in. I like to have like a good 5-minute conversation just about the person. How are they doing this week? What are some things that they're currently, going through in their business as far as like a win standpoint. So I always like to start it positively when we jump in and talk about any wins that they've had. Yeah, dude, let's start with some wins. Anything you can share with me over the last couple of weeks that you've seen or anything that's top of mind? My dog, you got a wholesale in there? Matt was able to talk me through, the project management spreadsheet that he was able to create, and he was able to show me that. So we talked about that for a little bit. My favorite thing to ask after the wins conversation is like, hey, what is one of the biggest challenges that you're facing this week? Have you had any challenges with Dispo? Have you started tracking Dispo metrics since we met? Okay, do you want to dive into that? That gives me a good idea to understand like where are they at? What is something that they feel like, they're not either understanding or that's keeping them from moving the needle forward based on the things we've talked about. So I can focus my time on the most important thing for them as well as what the business needs as we dive in. The reason I'm even bringing this up is because I'm looking at Quinn's performance. So here's what's important, okay? So when I did his last quarter, he had 42 offers, he had 12 contracts, which that puts him at 3.5 offers to a deal. Lee was at 28 offers, 10 deals, which is 2.8. So now when I look at the running 4 weeks, what's that tell me? This is jumping. The framework after that is really talking about the previous week's action items based on the things that we had talked about. Where are they at with completion of that? If they were able to complete that, great. What was the result from it? What did they learn from it? How did it help the business? And then vice versa, if it wasn't completed, kind of diving into, the reasons maybe that wasn't done. Was it something that they knew how to do? Did they understand the importance and why? Was it scheduled, or do they need some additional accountability when it comes to that? So we dive into that a little bit, and then what happens after that is, we spend about 20 to 25 minutes talking about the major concerns or challenges that they're facing. I think what the right question you're asking me is, how do I handle feelings versus facts, right? So that's just information. So I trust it, but I validate it, right? So how do you take the information, dive deep into it, and then actually solve the problem? That's how I handle that. So again, I'm preemptively having that conversation in the front end, and I'll say, hey, is that something you'd like to talk about today? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So I'll make time later on to go through some of those things. So one of his biggest challenges was time. At this point, I can understand why you're overwhelmed because you're doing a lot of things and some things aren't getting done. But how do I get you to the point where, the trackers and information and data is being filled in and accurately so that, so you can see it, right? Jumping into some of these frameworks and things, like I said, we're able to hire, or we're going to start to hire executive admin to pull these things. So he's being more efficient with his time looking at things, because high-level business owners, they make decisions based off data and not just off feeling. So a lot of his stuff is feeling, which can create paralysis analysis. Yeah, I think the feelings are valid. It's like, it gives me information to go seek and find the problem. I mean, we're getting the same stuff, dude. Like, we got people that, but again, I would be curious how we're handling those situations on the phone. And then we basically finished talking about action items for the next call. Then we scheduled the next call as well. And then I said, happy Thanksgiving. So I think what the right question you're asking me is, how do I handle feelings versus facts, right? So that's just information. So I trust it, but I validate it. You see what I'm saying? How do I take it from being a feeling versus a fact? And how do I take the facts and bridge the behavior gaps if that's what's happening? Or maybe you are doing everything you guys can on the acquisition side and it truly is a lead issue. So how do you take the information, dive deep into it, and then actually solve the problem? That's how I handle that. Me and Matt dove into his direct mail. He had mentioned to me that his response rate is dropping a little bit, but he's not filling in or tracking his metrics, which again is just a feeling, not a fact. So he mentioned to me at the beginning of the call that time is not his best friend at the moment. which, for, being able to fill out a tracker, manually inputting data is not the highest and best use of his time. And so because we're not able to make decisions off of direct mail, what we talked about was hiring a virtual assistant that would be able to put in the data. Obviously, we have all the training and curriculum so that they can effectively do that. So me and Matt agreed that for him to make decisions on his direct mail, we need to hire a VA that's going to fill in a tracker. He does understand how to use it and actually make decisions off it, but it just hasn't happened over the last couple of weeks. He knows it's supposed to be filled out, but because I'm bringing up the conversation talking about it being filled out, he knew that this was the accountability they needed, and he knew he needed help just based on other things that he's been able to spend time on in the business. So we were able to do that. Yeah, so quick recap with Matt. Couple topics that we got into. He is a high-level operator, and he's currently growing his team. And when that typically happens, like he's wearing a lot of different hats from a management seat. A lot of construction processes we're starting to put in place as far as like budgeting certain SOPs, and so he's focused a lot of time on that. So I'm super happy for him on that. He built out an entire tracker, understanding budgets, different timelines, different project management. So we were making sure that we're spending money, staying on time with projects, and staying within budgets. So that's a big deal to obviously have money from those deals. So that's a huge win. Some opportunities that we dug into. He is currently in the process. He has a team lead in acquisitions. So they're half on the phones, half management because of his time and where he's been kind of focusing it. What's kind of been missing is just the overall day-to-day management with like the acquisition scorecard, filling out a direct mail tracker. And so, I was having conversations with me. I was able to pinpoint those. What we decided to do is we're going to go ahead and hire a virtual assistant. That way that, the direct mail trackers or scorecards, different things like that can be filled out in a timely manner. So that way that the data is there so he can make decisions based off data. So he's not over leveraged by not doing it and not being able to make decisions. So, he was getting lead flow last week based on the expectation that he needs, but the team didn't have enough process calls. And so I'm like, hey, how are you communicating this with your team lead? How are you bringing that up? And to my knowledge, they weren't having those conversations. So when we're able to have those day-to-day management frameworks in place, a bad couple of days doesn't turn into a bad week, right? A bad week doesn't turn into a bad month and then et cetera into a bad quarter. So we talked about having what I would call stopgaps in place to make sure that we're on top of these things so that we don't go off feelings, we go off facts. And so we're actually talking through that, how we can, effectively run huddles and trainings to communicate things to him so he can make better decisions, especially as it's a Q4 when everyone's talking about, they're not ready to sell. Well, hey, I have a feeling that they're not ready to sell, but I'm not diving into the calls to actually figure out what's going on. So we talked about that. We're going to do a call audit review to actually get his offers to contract back to where they were, which was 3-1, jumped up a little bit. He hasn't reviewed the calls, but again, having a conversation with me, he's now going to go do the work to be able to do that. So I'm usually good at hearing like specific language of like, I feel, I think, this may be happening, right? But if I know if it actually is a problem, you say, hey, my response rate is dropping. This is exactly what I saw based on last month versus this month. So he wasn't actually effectively able to tell me like facts or data to support his thought. So I told him, I said, hey, the feeling's important. So I always say trust but validate, right? So the feeling's important, it's information, but how are you currently looking at that to understand what's truly happening? And so he knows he's supposed to fill out the direct mail tracker. He is not. And because of that, he's not able to actually make a decision on what's working or what's not. Well, so marketing's job is to stay within budget, number one, but also provide the right amount of leads for the team to be successful, right? And so we have a monthly goal when it comes to lead generation based on the marketing plan that we've created. And so obviously every single week we need to make sure we're getting the right amount of leads. That's not just the lead standpoint, but also the quality for acquisition to be successful. So if we're getting the lack of leads, then my guess is we're also getting a lack of quality. So, when we're looking at last week's metrics, for example, he only had one deal. He's supposed to get about 2 to 3 deals a week. And so I'm looking at the acquisition metrics. I'm like, hey, you're getting X amount of leads, which he is getting, but making sure we're bringing in quality for the team to be successful is really important because that's his job as he oversees marketing, right? Is to be able to provide those opportunities. Unfortunately, at this very moment in time, he's not. So, but obviously in the future, we're going to be able to do that and do it effectively. Yeah, that's right. Come back again and we'll give you an update. So it should be positive.